And Mike, it's great to see you. Tell us, first of all, about the undefeated ULM Warhawks and their start to the season.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Roger. It's 1-0 start, which is always good. 29-0 win over St. Francis last Thursday to open the season. And a game that wasn't real pretty for ULM. Really kind of felt like they're sleepwalking a little bit in that ball game, but there's been ULM teams in the past that played flat in a game like that, and it would come down to the last possession to beat an FCS team or something. And so they won 29-0, which I think speaks a little bit to this team. But we had a weather delay about an hour and a half anyway, and the teams got pulled off the field 50 minutes before kickoff. So they had to sit around for about 2 hours or so, came back out for a 10-minute warm up, and then it was right into the game. And I think that impacted how the Warhawks played a little bit in that ball game, but we'll see this week. It's going to be real tough. It was tough to tell last week with an FCS opponent, and especially an FCS opponent like St. Francis that announced they're going to Division III back in March, and so they got hit really hard with guys transferring out. And now this week going to play Alabama, it's really hard to tell just exactly where this team is at. For our fans, we probably got to wait a couple more weeks. We get a bye week next week and then go to UTEP, and then we might get a real measure of where this team is. But I think the optimism is still there. Some folks may be hitting the panic button about 29-0 over St. Francis, but I think they feel good about where this program's headed under Bryant Vincent in his second year.
Well, in a 29 nothing final score, the number that really stands out is the zero, the nothing that
Mhm.
this defense was able to post, regardless of who you play in college football. What stood out to you defensively about the Warhawks last week?
They did a really nice job of stopping the run. I mean, St. Francis was trying to keep things tight, run a lot of fly sweeps, try to get to the edge. And they did a nice job for the most part bottling that up. They only let the red flash get across the 50 one time in the game. It was really a pretty dominant defensive effort, I think. And then, fans are upset about the offense, which still rushed for 311 yards in the game. But it's the defense really was on the edge is where it's set. Billy Poland and Cavante Wells have both done a very nice job. They're maybe the best edge tandem, one of the best edge tandems in the Sun Belt coming into this year, and they both stayed. Both were pursued, both were offered, to get in the portal and money to go somewhere else, and they both decided to stay at ULM and see this thing through and try to get to a bowl game. They added some beef in the middle, if you will. Cliff Mosley comes over from Henderson State, where he didn't play a lot, but he has a history with Cavante Wells and Billy Poland at the JUCO level, and so they have a little bit of chemistry there. Added depth at the linebacker spot, some guys that can fly around, especially, Cedrian Langston and Tyrese Hopkins come back. They add in a transfer portal a guy who was a JUCO All-American last year, Noah Flemings, and Marcus Ross comes in as a transfer from Mississippi State as well. And the secondary, they wanted to get deeper there. They feel like they got to be a man coverage team when they're doing things best. I don't know that they're going to play man on Saturday against Alabama, but they will play. That's what they want to play ideally. And they did load up on some guys that they feel like can play man to man in the secondary. So they really added a lot of depth. They feel good about the ones and rolling into the twos. They like to play 18 to 22 guys, call them co-starters and go from there. But they really did a nice job adding to the depth, and I feel like we really saw that last Thursday against St. Francis.
And then on the offensive side of the ball, just what's the personality and kind of style of play the Warhawks want to have this year?
It's going to be a power game. They want to throw it a little bit more than they did last year, but it's this team is based on running the football. It's a 12 personnel set, which is what Bryant Vincent wants to run. And so they'll feature 4 to 5 different running backs. Last year it was the true freshman Ahmad Hardy, who's now at Missouri and put up 100 yards in his debut at the Tigers last week. But that single feature back is probably gone because they added so much depth because running backs saw what they can do in Bryant Vincent's system, so that they really loaded up in the offseason. Braylon McReynolds, a Mobile native, South Alabama transfer, leads the way. He had his first career 100-yard game against St. Francis. Behind him, you got Zach Palmer Smith, a transfer from Richmond that's posted over 2,000 yards in his career. And then Dorian Lewis took a year off out of New Mexico, comes back this year at ULM. And then, Deshaun Ford is kind of the headliner at the back end, a kid that was on the Navy All-American game last year on NBC and committed to ULM on the Navy All-American game. Probably the first time ever ULM's been mentioned on the Navy All-American game. So, really a big step forward there. And They're going to pound the ball. That's what they want to do. But again, if they can get that passing game, take a little bit of pressure off, I think that's been the focus this offseason is trying to find a little more in the passing game than what they had last year.
Yeah, speaking of the quarterback play, what can you tell us about Armenta?
Yeah, it is really, it's only his second year at ULM. It's really his third year in the system, though, because he played for Bryant Vincent when he was the offensive coordinator at New Mexico. So they've been together now for 3 years, and Coach really likes the way Aiden's playing, the confidence he has. The numbers against St. Francis weren't great, but he was also hamstrung by some drops and some other things that, just didn't quite go his way. The timing was a little off on a couple of plays, so hopefully that gets better from game one to game two. But he has really taken command of this. You can really see the leadership he has this season. And he's a guy that he can run a little bit too. We saw that against St. Francis. He didn't show it a lot last year, but he took off, had I believe, about a 40-yard quarterback draw against St. Francis. So he's a guy that I think is starting to come into his own, build his confidence, and he's only a redshirt sophomore. He's still got a couple more years that he can play college football. So he's a guy that's really, really started to develop this year.
Well, you mentioned the name Bryant Vincent, the head coach at ULM. For those of us like me that live in Birmingham, very familiar with him and the good work that he did at UAB. But how'd you see him come to Monroe last season and kind of make this program his own?
He has seen what's needed in this program as far as getting more money into the program, getting more help as far as facilities, nutrition, revamping the strength program, athletic training. He's been big on getting out and meeting people and just trying to drive more money into it. And he's done a great job. The nutrition program has been completely transformed in 1 year with him. They have done some little things to the facilities, just some cosmetic things, but things that have needed to be done for some time. So while the overall structure of it didn't change, it sure looks a heck of a lot better now, and certainly is much more appealing to some of the guys coming in. But he has dove in. I mean, it can be evidence too that he's now interim athletic director in addition to being the head coach, and he's the offensive coordinator for this bunch too. He has pretty much said he likes this athletic director role because he can kind of cut through some things and figure out, hey, where's this mess that's been built up over the years? Let's get rid of that. Let's streamline this and make this flow. And he's really been very hands-on. I think he likes doing it all. He's kind of that control guy, but it's really changed things. It's changed the perception of this program. I've been around here since the fall of 2018, and by far this is the most excited the Monroe community has been for a Warhawk football season. And they really feel like this could be one of the better teams they've had. I mean, it's 30 plus years of being an FBS program with one bowl game in that time. They feel like this is the team to do that for the second time. This is the team that may go get that first bowl trophy for this program. They feel like all of that's coming together, and it's because of how Bryant Vincent has gotten the community to invest, but also in how he's invested in the community to get the folks to buy in too.
You mentioned some cosmetic changes, and apologies for those listening on radio, especially on game day. But I got to ask about the new helmets. No offense to the ULM logo, which is nice, looks great on the white helmet, but one of those you have on the shelf, and what I believe you wore in the first game, that kind of Warhawk, like fighter jet looking logo.
Mhm.
Where did that come about? Was that debuted last season? I mean, it's a tremendous new look for you all.
Yeah, it's they had it a couple years ago. They really revamped it, streamlined it, added some different color to it last year. And so it's the shark eye and shark teeth that's on the side of the P40 Curtis Warhawk, which when they switched to the Warhawk nickname, they kind of went more the bird route at first and like we're a hawk, but now they finally have come back to what it should be, which is to look at the military ties, especially with General Chenault being from Northeast Louisiana, and he led the Flying Tigers who flew those P-40 planes in World War II in China. So it's a nice tie-in back to all of that. And so you have what was on the nose of those planes on the helmets now. And they've unveiled a couple other concepts. Of course, they've got the military star on one of those concepts on a black helmet, and then they're also going to have I believe, a different one coming out soon. I don't want to spill anything too soon, but I believe there's another one coming yet, so that they haven't quite announced yet. So a couple different looks, but this one is my favorite by far. It's such a nice, clean look. It's different and really looked great last week wearing the all whites at home. I'm not sure what ULM's wearing on game day at Alabama this week, but sure looks good when it's the all whites put together.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, would love to see that on the field at Saban Field coming up on Saturday. It'd be one of the more unique helmets Alabama has faced throughout the years. Certainly good to see ULM back on the Crimson Tide schedule. You mentioned it, a bye week coming up the week after, and then you really start to get into the teeth of this Sun Belt schedule. If you could just kind of set the table for what's ahead for the Warhawks once we get through this week in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, this is the bye week is big after this because as a school from the Sun Belt coming into Alabama, you want to go out and compete and, give it everything you've got. But you usually get banged up in games like this. So it's nice to have a week off and repair and kind of get ready to go because after that it gets real. Another non-conference game to go to UTEP in 2 weeks. So that we feel like is kind of the big game to, whether this team's going to get to 6 wins or not. You got to find a way to beat another team who's scrapping to get to six like UTEP is. And then Arkansas State at home. ULM's lost 15 in a row to A-State. They've got to snap that streak. They have been so close so many times, and I think they really have that one circled. Then back-to-back weeks at Northwestern, at Coastal Carolina. Northwestern, that may be the most winnable Power Four game ULM has had on the schedule in some time. Not saying they're going to do it, but I think they like their chances possibly going to Evanston to open November. They then get Troy at home. They go to Southern Miss, which is a completely different group with Charles Huff this year. And then finally, November, home to Old Dominion, which has never come to Monroe before. And teams usually struggle that first trip to Monroe. If they've never made the trip, it's one of the more unique trips in college football. So we'll see how they handle that. And then home to South Alabama, and then on the road to Texas State, and then the Cajuns to end the year. Don't call them that other name. So that's that's what we do around here. So it's a tough schedule. We feel like the Sun Belt West is as balanced as it's ever been, and feel like there's opportunities for wins, but they also feel like 50-50 games. They could easily go the other way. So got to find a way to stay healthy here through Alabama and then have a chance to really go take care of business and maybe possibly do something historic for what ULM football's been through.
And finally, this is the first time we've talked to you, Mike, since these two schools played back in 2022. We knew there was some realignment on the horizon for the Sun Belt, but since that time, how have you seen the Sun Belt transforming? It seems like more on people's radar now, especially with some of the great opportunities to watch the games on the ESPN family of networks.
Yeah, they've done a great job of buying into the ESPN part of it. And E Plus gets some criticism here and there, especially when you talk about Power Four leagues and whatnot. But the Sun Belt's embraced it, and it's really done a nice job for them. And in turn, they've gotten a couple extra games picked up on linear ESPN networks here and there. And so ULM actually had 5 or 6 games, I think, make it to linear last year, which was great. Uh, Really the Sun Belt, though, I think where they've survived and thrived in this era, they've really gone about getting football brands and not necessarily the market and worried about all that. I mean, you go all the way back to when they added App State, Georgia Southern, when South Alabama and Georgia State started their football programs, that while they didn't have the tradition, they're in an area that fits geographically. And then this last round, they had been in such a position that they were then attractive for a school like Southern Miss, for Marshall, for Old Dominion to come over. James Madison has been waiting for a long, long time to make that leap and waiting for the right opportunity, and they felt like the Sun Belt was finally there, that they could make that jump and make that move. And to stay as tight as they are geographically, to pick the right brands and all of that, the Sun Belt's done a nice job advancing. It's a much different league than when I first arrived here, and certainly challenging for one of those top spots in the group of five, group of six, whatever you want to call it, conferences at this point.
Well, look forward to seeing what happens on Saturday between Alabama and ULM. And then, Mike, just all the best to you and the Warhawks coming up in this 2025 season. Just thank you for the time you've given us. Safe travels to Alabama coming up this weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.